Oh. Uh, uh, okay, very good. There we are. Okay, good. Hello, happy Monday, and welcome to this week's webinar. Um, Hope everybody is getting audio and video correctly. Last week we had a couple of issues because people had the wrong number to send me text messages. So if you want to send a message, send it to 650-218-4246. That's my correct number for text. I'm going to stop for just a second because I'm getting some feedback from a microphone in another computer. I'll be right back. Okay, so I think that takes care, hopefully, of all the audio problems. If there are any issues, then please send me a text to 650-218-4246. If I don't receive any messages, then I'm going to assume that the audio and the video are fine, and I'm going to keep going. I did have a great suggestion from somebody last week to actually get a lapel mic, which I dutifully did, and it's not working. So the best laid plans of mice and men and all that. So anyway, this continues to evolve from a technical standpoint. Another suggestion was that when I'm talking about full swing, that I also have an additional full length, full body camera. So again, all suggestions gratefully received, and I'll be looking into that. So as we move along, what do we think about the Masters? Pretty exciting, huh? So my friend, the local boy, Bryson DeChambeau, been a student of my good friend Mike Shy for over 10 years. Put in a great performance there. Low amateur by 5 strokes, and I believe he's turning pro today, actually, and will be playing at Sea Island this week as a professional for the first time. So look out for him, and hopefully he can make enough money. He has 6 starts to make whatever the threshold is to be able to get his card for next year. Otherwise, he'll have to play on the web.com tour. So I thought that yesterday was, I actually switched the topic of today's webinar based upon yesterday's results. I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened to Jordan Spieth and how that might relate to what happens to the rest of us on the golf course. And really, I think it boils down to, it's a question of context. I'm sure if you'd asked Jordan Spieth 2.5 years ago when he turned pro, if at the end of 2.5 years he would have won, what's he won, 5 or 6 times on tour, plus 2 majors, and finished second in 3 more majors, I think he would have taken that and grabbed your hand up and run with it and said, wow, I am so lucky, this is fantastic. And again, in the last 3 playings of the Masters, he's finished second, first, second. But no doubt he thinks that he should have won all 3, and obviously he did have a chance to win all 3. But in golf, even the most successful golfers are going to lose more than they win. It's a little bit like baseball. If you're batting 350 or 400, then you are an absolute superstar. And so you've got to be able to take the rough with the smooth. And there are lots of pundits this morning and yesterday on the TV talking about what happened to Jordan and where it all started to go wrong. And those of you that have worked with me with the Focus Band, I'm going to grab it, show you, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, the Focus Band, which is the brain training headset here. Some of you have had experience, you all will by the end of this series. Some of you might know that Jason Day has been training with Focus Band for about 3 years now, and that Jordan Spieth actually did start working with the guys at Focus Band at the end of last season, after he missed 2 cuts in a row and was experiencing some what he called mental or focus issues. And I understand that yesterday after the round, his explanation for what happened was that he lost Mushin and he lost Quiet Eye. Now, those of you that have worked with Folkspan will understand those terms. Mushin is actually, it's a Japanese term. It comes from martial arts, and it translates as mind of no mind. So in other words, quiet mind. And Quiet Eye is something that was identified by a lady called Joan Vickers. Um, and what she was able to determine using some headsets with eye scanning technology in them was that, for example, a basketball player shooting a free throw is frequently instructed to just look at the rim, look at the front of the rim while you shoot. But in using the headset, Vickers was able to see that even though the player thought they were only looking at the rim, they would actually look at the rim and then the backboard and then the net and then the rim again and sometimes over into the crowd. And so when she was able to train people to keep their eyes focused on one particular point, their performance improved. This proved to be the same for golf. Initially, she worked on this with putting only and was able to demonstrate that when people were able to have this quiet eye, that they would putt better. So when you tie the two things together, when you tie the brain sensing headset, so what the focus band is actually doing is measuring electrical activity in your brain and can determine whether you're in the left side, the analytical part of your brain, or the right side of your brain, which is the home to all of the automatic motions that we do, things like brushing our teeth, combing our hair, tying our shoelaces, riding a bike, signing our name, driving the car. All of those things we've learned how to do, and so now we can just call those things up from the right side of the brain. And so Jordan's explanation as to what happened was after he bogeyed 10 and he bogeyed 11, he just lost motion. He was in the analytical part of the brain. He was thinking, he was trying to make the correct swing and just didn't work. And by the time he hit the first ball in the water, he was basically in a position where he was almost unable at that point to make a good, clear decision. The shock of the quadruple bogey on 12 was enough to jolt him back into, oh man, I have lost motion, I have lost quiet eye, and he was able to sort of regain his composure and his ability in that area until he got to 17 and the pressure of the situation. He knew, having missed the birdie putt on 16, that he was going to have to birdie 17 and 18 to get into a playoff. And again, at that point, he lost that focus. Now, I think had he been in a situation where he'd been working with Focus Band for 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even only 6 months, he would have had a better chance. I mean, it was still a big ask. Only a couple of people in Masters history have ever finished with, I think only one person's only ever finished with 4 birdies on the last 4 holes, which was basically what he needed to do. And so the content of today's webinar and leads us into next week's seminar. So for those of you that don't have this on their calendar yet, next Monday, 10:30 until 12:30, right here at Balbi Golf, we will have the first of the 2 in-person seminars. And this one, the subject is going to be the focus band and fluid motion factor. Now, fluid motion factor is, again, some of you already know this, but fluid motion factor is a system devised by a guy called Stephen Yellen, who was a college tennis player at the, I'm not sure which university, somewhere back east. And as a senior, he had an experience during a tennis match where everything just went right. He was in the mythical zone. It turned out to be not so mythical. But anyway, he was in the zone, and everything worked. He knew everything. As other people have described, time slowed down. He felt like he had all the time in the world to play his shots and to place his shots, and just absolutely destroyed his opponent. So Stephen has spent basically the last 30 years developing a system that at first was probably more theoretical than actual factual or provable. But with the advent of modern brain analyzing technology, he was able to show that uh, peak performance happened when the athlete was operating in the right side of the brain as opposed to the left side of the brain. So there's some big differences. The first one is that even though your left side of your brain is very fast, it can process up to 40,000 instructions per second. It's pretty slow in comparison to the right side of the brain that can process 11 million instructions per second. So for example, if you knock something off the desk and just reflexively reach out and grab it, that's purely a left brain activity. If you've ever found yourself driving your car and suddenly like, oh, how did I get here? I wasn't really thinking about the driving, but here I am. I've arrived safely, or I'm further down the road than I thought I would be, and perfectly safely. Riding a bike. When we first learn to ride a bike, it's sort of wobble, wobble. How do I do this? How am I ever going to control this combination of the handlebars and the pedals? And then all of a sudden, it actually just works. And you can actually see that in the brain activity where somebody's learning a skill. The amount of activity will be very high on a graph of 0 to 100%. It's very high, and then suddenly it drops down. It's not gradual. It's not that they learn this thing over time. It's I've got it, boom, and then it drops down to maybe 15 or 20%. And so that's the way we'd like the golf swing to be, right? We'd like the golf swing to just be able to happen. Just as if I said to you, please walk across the room to the other side of the room, then assuming you're in agreement, you would just walk. You don't have to think about how do I start walking, how do I make sure that my right foot gets in front of my left foot and then the other foot, and how do I make sure that I stop in time so I don't walk into the wall. It's just something that you do because you've done it a whole bunch of times. Same thing for coming downstairs. Coming downstairs is a fairly mundane, everyday thing that we do. But imagine for a moment that the staircase was tilted. So maybe it was tilted a little to the left, or the pitch of it was a little steeper. That would make that challenge a little greater. And so it's similar to what happens on the golf course when virtually none of your shots are from a flat lie. If it's flat, most of the time, the only time that it's flat is if you're at the driving range or you're here at Balbi Golf, and it's perfectly flat. And then you get on the golf course, and it's some kind of tilted. And you go from uphill to downhill to side hill all the time. And so your brain has to be able to process that, and it's pretty good at doing it. But having a really clear set of instructions so that your brain goes through this process of we take in the information about the tilt, we take in the information about uphill, downhill, and we apply that to the swing. We take a practice swing so we can actually see, are we able to make the swing we want right here? So that brings us to what exactly is the swing we want? Obviously, we're all pretty good at getting into the address position. There may be small postural issues that we're working on together, but basically you know where you're going to start your swing. But as you all know, I put a lot of attention on where does the swing finish. So it's important from a balance standpoint because your brain has to be able to calculate how do I finish here and be in balance, and also the deceleration phase of the swing. So from roundabout impact to the finish takes about 0.2 of a second. but your brain has to be able to slow down and stop all of the different parts. So your club head, for example, might be going 80 miles an hour or more, which means your hands are going to be going about 50 miles an hour, your upper body 30, maybe pelvis 15 to 20, knees 8 to 10 miles an hour. All these segments of the body and the club, excuse me, uh, all of these segments of the body and the club weigh different amounts and they're going at different speeds, and yet they all have to stop at basically the same time in order for you to maintain your balance in the finish. And the analogy that I like to use is it's like a gymnast. If you're doing a backflip on one of those 4-inch wide balance beams, you have to be able to stick the finish. Can be a life-threatening situation. If you miss that finish and fall on your head, I mean, you could break. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about what could happen in those circumstances. So I guarantee that that gymnast does not launch themselves backwards unless they're 100% sure not only where they're going to land, but in their ability to also land it. And so sometimes you have to repeat the motion, going to the finish, looking at your balance finish, seeing how good it is, and you have to really look at small little things in order to get that balance finish to be ultimately correct. Those of you that remember Katarina Witt, the great world champion and Olympic champion figure skater, she was once asked about a particular move. I'm not sure what it was called, but it was a triple something or other. So it was one of those jump up in the air, spin around 3 times, and land. And at the time, she was one of the only athletes in the world that could continually or consistently land that jump. And she was asked why she was so good at it. And she said that she just happened to be prepared to fall on her butt more often than the other girls. She said, it hurts. When you don't stick that and you fall down, it hurts. You fall on the ice, it hurts. But I was committed to being able to stick this jump, and I knew I would have to keep doing it, fight through the pain until it didn't hurt anymore. And so her reward obviously was world championships and Olympic medals. So obviously, you don't have to fight through the pain of falling down in order to be able to stick your finish, but you do have to know where it is. And so we got a couple of different things going on here. We're talking about the mental side of it in terms of your ability to stay focused on the job in hand. So if you are clear that you can make the swing you want to make because you've made a practice swing, you know that you can make this motion and finish in balance, then you know that you've got the correct club for the distance, and so then you have to be able to make that swing without getting distracted by something else. I think in Jordan Spieth's case yesterday, he'd hit a poor tee shot on number 10. It was a flare to the right. He hit another poor tee shot on number 11, a flare to the right. He also mentioned in the post-round interview that he was having trouble on the par 3s this week with that shot, losing a little to the right. Makes me wonder why maybe he didn't just take an extra club and make sure that he got over the creek. He would have been way better off in the back bunker or long. I think long on that whole worst case scenario, he makes a 5 and would still have been either leading or tied, probably leading at that point, and would have been in the tournament, and I think probably would have won at that point. So because of the doubt that was there, and because he was not able to clearly get into quiet eye and get into Mushin and make the swing. I mean, obviously his muscle memory knows exactly how to make that swing, but he got out of his comfort zone. Instead of automatically doing it from the right brain, he got into his left brain. So I'm going to try and show you here a couple of things on the screen from the focus band. So I'm going to put this on. And you might think this is not a supremely attractive piece of equipment, but I can tell you that it's a whole lot better than it used to be. When I first started working with Focus Band, which was about 4 years ago, this thing was a huge, big headset. It kind of looked like something that you would wear if you were trying to prevent the aliens from reading your thoughts. And so it really was quite an amazing thing. And because it was so big, we could only use it for putting. It wasn't stable on the head. You couldn't use it for a full swing like we can now. So I am going to attach this and hopefully can show you some screens in just a second. Okay, we're getting okay. So this works with any Android or iPhone or iPad device. So what I have to do is pair it with my headset. See if we can get that to work here. Technical problems. Okay. As those of you know that have been working with this with me, it generally works all the time. So I'm just going to look here and see if we can get it to pair. Otherwise, we'll move on to another screen here. Let me just see if I can find. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you the screen, and if we're not able to pair it, then so be it. So what we've got here, I'll hold this in front of the screen for you. Well, that's kind of interesting because part of it is green. It's the chroma key showing through, so I wasn't expecting that. So anyway, the part where you can see the picture in the background showing through, that's actually would normally be green, so you can see the right side of the brain. So if I'm in the right side of the brain, then that is showing green, and then the part in front of the eyes, that would be where we've got mushing and quiet eye. So that's something that we're going to be working with, is to get those two things. I'm going to make one more attempt to pair this and see if we can get it to work. Maybe, maybe not. Well, that's too bad. All right, not working today. Okay, never mind. So it's an amazing piece of technology, I can tell you that. Unfortunately, not working right now. The great thing about the Focus Band, though, is that it also integrates with the Flight Scope launch monitor. So what we're able to do now is not only look at where you are in terms of, are you in your left brain or right brain when you're setting up for the golf ball and when you're swinging, but we can look at it relative to the actual result you got from that swing. And so that's been one of the great things for a lot of golfers, has been the ability to tie in the fact that when they're operating from the right brain, then they get a significant improvement in the quality of the shot. And so I'm sure you've all had this circumstance where you're standing over the ball and you're worried about, where it's going to go, what the miss is going to be. Maybe somebody's watching and you feel like you're going to be embarrassed if you hit a bad shot. And so really you're thinking about everything other than just letting yourself make the swing. And generally speaking, that ends up in a poor shot. I remember a circumstance a few years ago where I was playing in a practice round for a qualifying tournament, and going along, I was playing with a friend, playing pretty well. I think I was about 1 under through 7 holes. Came to the 8th hole, which was a par 3, and the group in front, which was a threesome, they were playing slower, and so they said, "Hey, why don't you play through?" Well, as we approached the tee, I realized that this was 3 other Northern California PGA pros, 3 people recognized as good players, and I was immediately nervous. And I got onto the tee and I set up over the ball, and all I could think was, I'm going to shank this over the fence, or I'm going to top it in the bunker. Fortunately, in that circumstance, I had the presence of mind to stop, turn around, talk to the guys and say, boy, you guys are making me nervous. So I was able to make light of it, make a bit of a joke of it. They offered to turn their backs so they couldn't see the shot. But anyway, having reduced the tension, I was then able to get back over the ball and hit a good shot onto the green to about 15 feet. So I was absolutely thrilled. And I was convinced that had I made the swing before I was in the right frame of mind, I would have hit a very bad shot. And so you have to look out for that. Once you've learned the techniques of fluid motion factor and you've had the feedback from the focus band so that you will actually know when you're in that correct state of mind, then it's your job to notice what's happening when you're actually on the golf course. Got a question here, 1 second, let me look. Oh, okay. So somebody reading my mind, they're asking, Tommy's asking, what happens when I'm on the golf course? How do I take this training from the, do I have to take the focus band on the golf course with me? No, you don't. Of course, if you want to, they are available for sale. But you don't have to take it on the golf course. What you do is you learn how to get into that state of mind and what it feels like, which is hard to describe. Some people describe it as a feeling of calmness in their body. Some people relate it more to the mind. I even had one player, a very good player, a plus handicap player, said that it felt to him like he was almost having an out-of-body experience, like he was watching himself swinging. He wasn't really aware that he was trying to make the swing. He was just aware that he was swinging, and that when he did that, that's when he produced great shots. And I wouldn't say that having Mushin and having Quiet Eye and utilizing fluid motion factor, they're not guarantees of good shots, but they certainly make good shots more likely. And so being able to put yourself in that state of mind is incredibly helpful, and you will find that you will hit more good shots. So I hope as many of you as possible are able to come to the seminar next week. If not, it will be recorded, and within the next day or so, I'm going to give you access to some online information about fluid motion factor so that you can watch that and sort of digest some of the information ahead of time so that it will make a lot more sense when we're actually here, and you'll be able to put this into practice a lot faster. So hopefully that answered your question, Tom. What I want all of you to come away from this series, the webinars, the seminars, the lessons, I want you all to be able to come away from this with a concrete sense of what it takes to be in the correct place in your mind, the correct mindset, to be able to produce your best shots. Now, will you be able to do it every time? No, absolutely not. But will the ability to get into this mental place improve your game? Absolutely, I guarantee it. And you may find that it carries over into other areas of your life. Maybe you're also tennis players or skiers or some other discipline that requires you to be very focused and yet perform without having to mentally do A, then B, then C. In my own experience, I have a client who is a world-class competitive rifle shooter. He has seen a tremendous improvement in his results. I also know that in Australia, where the focus band folks are from, they've been using system with both kids with ADHD, helping them to be able to focus. Also, there seems to be some good evidence coming out from some hospitals that are using it with patients with PTSD. that they're able to calm their minds and focus and function in situations which, heretofore they found to be very challenging or actually impossible to function under those circumstances. So, just checking any other, hold on one second, just looking for questions here. Okay, so another question about the session next week. If you're able to be here, fantastic. If you're not able to be here, it will be recorded, so you'll be able to look at it later. And as I said, the information from the fluid motion factor will be available to you within the next 24 hours, so that should be very helpful. In terms of the focus band, somebody's asking me how much it costs to get a focus band. They're $500, which is, in my opinion, amazingly inexpensive. When we first worked with the system 4 years ago, it was almost 5,000. So they've been able to not only miniaturize it, so now it works. You don't need a separate computer. You can slip it in your pocket. You can wear it on the golf course. You could run the software on your iPhone, which is in your pocket, and listen to the feedback tones that it also provides. You could listen to them through a headset. So it runs on iPhone, iPad, or Android devices also. I've tried it on an Android. I know it works on a tablet. I have not personally used it on an Android phone, but I understand it works just fine. So we'll be, if you want, again, there's no, I don't want anybody to do anything during the sessions that they feel uncomfortable with. You will have an opportunity to try the headset when you come next week, or we'll also, for those of you that we haven't used it yet in the lessons, we will be doing that. And so I think it's important that everybody has the opportunity to be exposed to this and starts to get a sense of what's possible. One of the people that use focus band and who was actually very resistant to doing it for whatever reason, they were resistant to putting this thing on. I think they thought they wouldn't be able to do it or something. I don't know. Immediately found that when they got into the mushing state, which took 2 or 3 minutes to be able to get there, but once they could get into the mushing state, they could do it consistently. When they were in the mushing state, they hit better shots, the swing felt better, and the results were measurably better on the flight scope. And so it opens up a whole new world of what am I supposed to be thinking? What's my brain supposed to be doing? What does it feel like to be in that place where I just can produce my best performance? And so it's really pretty exciting. All right, so we've been going about 32 minutes. I'm just going to check and see. One of the pieces of feedback I had from last week was that maybe we went on a little bit too long. So my plan going forward, and again, I appreciate any feedback you want to give on this. My plan is to prepare about 30 minutes worth of information and then have time for questions or feedback or texts or whatever as we're getting towards the end. So again, I'm just going to check, see if there are any more questions on the text here. Oh, so somebody is asking if there's going to be a webinar next week. So again, let me have your feedback. My plan right now is yes to do a webinar. So we're going to be doing the seminar from 10:30 to 12:30 here in San Carlos at Balbi Golf, and then I guess it's going to depend upon how many people are able to get here. If everybody's able to come in, then you're probably going to be on your way home. So whether we do the webinar or not, I'm happy to do it. So again, please give me your feedback as far as that's concerned. Obviously, if only some people are able to get here for the seminar, then it's probably worthwhile me doing the webinar afterwards. So I'm perfectly happy to do that. Okay, so I think that's it for the questions. Again, I will look out for the links. If you also want to learn a little bit more, both about the focus band and the fluid motion factor. The website for focus band is iFocusBand, so the letter I, focus band, ifocusband.com. You can go online and look at that. And the fluid motion factor, again, I think it's fluidmotionfactor.com. But if you search for fluid motion factor or Stephen Yellin, Yellin, you will find some really good information. Stephen currently works from the David Ledbetter Academy in Orlando, and so works with some pretty good players. And what's very interesting is that Stephen has embraced the focus band because it absolutely validates what he's been talking about and working on for almost 30 years. And so the combination of those two technologies is amazingly powerful. And I look forward to all of you being able to experience just how powerful for yourself. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks very much. Bye.